There's a modern lie that has silently destroyed millions of men. The idea that always being kind, available, emotionally transparent and harmless will make the world respect you. It won't. Most of the time, it will do the exact opposite, because the world doesn't work based on pretty ideals. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. And however uncomfortable it may sound, the most dangerous men in history were almost never the loudest, the most aggressive, or the most impulsive. They were the most aware, the most disciplined, those who understood real human nature without emotional illusions. While most lived reacting to their environment like emotional puppets, these men learned to control silence, presence, perception, and direction. And that's exactly what almost no one teaches today. The truth is that many men live asleep without realizing it. They work, consume distractions, seek approval, feign happiness, and spend entire years trapped in a persona created solely for social survival. But at some point, something breaks. It could be betrayal, failure, a strange emptiness in the silence of the early morning, or that uncomfortable feeling of realizing that one's own life is being driven more by fear than by choice. And perhaps the worst thing of all is understanding that no one will come to save you from this invisible prison. Because weak men wait for rescue. Dangerous men build their own way out. Better to be feared than loved has never meant gratuitous cruelty. It means developing enough strength not to be treated as disposable. It means learning to withstand pressure without losing direction. It means stopping negotiating one's own identity just to be accepted. In this video, you'll understand how the most powerful men in history developed a mindset that's virtually impossible to manipulate. You'll discover why silence is worth more than excessive explanation, why discipline matters more than motivation, why suffering can be transformed into a strategic advantage, and above all, why a man's greatest enemy is almost never outside himself. Virtù and fortuna favor those who learn to see the game as it truly is. And when you begin to perceive certain truths about power, human behavior, and emotional control, it becomes impossible to go back to sleep the same way. Because after a man learns to observe the world without naivete, something within him slowly begins to become dangerous. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. Most men believe they are making their own decisions, but in practice, they merely react to their environment like someone unconsciously pressing invisible buttons within their own mind. They wake up, grab their phones, consume ready-made opinions, work for approval, silently seek validation, and call this freedom. And the most curious thing is that they don't even realize how domesticated they have been. Machiavelli already understood that true control never happens through explicit force, but through the comfortable illusion of choice. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. That's exactly how the world works behind the scenes. While many live trying to appear good, virtuous, and accepted, few understand that there is a brutal difference between being loved and being respected. Better to be feared than loved doesn't mean becoming an emotional tyrant. It means developing enough presence, clarity, and firmness so that no one treats your existence as disposable. The sleeping man avoids conflict, flees from difficult decisions, and lives anesthetized by constant entertainment. He laughs at everything, but almost never thinks deeply about anything, and this creates a dangerous trap. The more distracted he is, the more manipulable he becomes. Just observe how many men spend hours watching other people's lives while completely abandoning the construction of their own. It's almost like watching someone hand over their own destiny in small, silent, daily installments. And ironically, many do it with a smile. The problem is that the sleeping man rarely perceives the signs of his own inner decay. He feels a strange emptiness when alone, but immediately runs to any distraction that prevents the silence from revealing the truth. Social media, overstimulation, pre-packaged opinions, shallow conversations, emotional pornography, impulsive consumption. All of this creates a mental fog that prevents strategic clarity. And without clarity, there is no power. Virtù and fortuna walk hand in hand, only for those who can see beyond the emotional smoke of daily life. A simple example of this is observing men who constantly complain about their financial lives but have never studied investments, never read books like The Richest Man in Babylon or Financial Psychology, and don't even understand how compound interest works. They want results without building perception. They want respect without developing competence. They want freedom without discipline. And here comes an uncomfortable truth. The world doesn't reward intention, it rewards ability. The end justifies the means, not in the vulgar sense that many interpret it, but in the understanding that concrete results require concrete actions. It's not enough to desire change. It's necessary to create strategic movements daily. The sleeping man lives waiting for motivation. The awakened man, however, learns to act even when tired, because he understands that emotions change quickly, but the consequences of inaction remain for years. And few realize this early enough. Perhaps the most dangerous part of this modern anesthesia is that it seems comfortable at first. A man convinces himself that there's still time, that he'll start tomorrow, that he first needs to find himself. But while he waits for the perfect moment, other silent men are studying, building wealth, strengthening their minds, learning communication, training their bodies, and understanding true human nature. Decisions based on true human nature always outweigh decisions based solely on emotion, and that changes everything. An awakened man observes patterns. He understands who talks too much, who manipulates through guilt, who uses an appearance of virtue only to control others emotionally. He begins to realize that many environments are built precisely to keep people weak, dependent, and distracted. And when this realization appears, something uncomfortable happens. He can no longer return to his previous state. It's like opening your eyes after years of living in a dark room. At first it hurts. You want to pretend you didn't see anything. But there's a curious detail. The more he observes the behavior of the people around him, the more he realizes that the real game doesn't happen in words, but in the silence between them. And that's exactly where the next step begins to reveal something even more dangerous. The average person believes that power is linked only to money, status, or social influence. But the most dangerous men in history understood early on that true power is born from perception. Before dominating any environment, they learn to dominate themselves. And this completely changes how someone moves in the world. Machiavelli understood that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, was what separated leaders from manipulable men. Because the world doesn't work based on what it should be, but on what it really is. The man who understands this stops acting like an emotional child waiting for universal justice and begins to develop a strategic reading of reality. He realizes, for example, that insecure people talk too much to seem important. Weak people try to control through guilt. Dangerous people rarely announce their intentions. And truly powerful men don't need to prove their strength all the time. The lion doesn't walk through the forest reminding the other animals that it's a lion. Its presence silently resolves that. The problem is that most people have been conditioned to seek approval instead of competence. And those who depend on the validation of others hand over their own power to them without realizing it. Better to be feared than loved has never meant living in a state of war with the world. It means building such a solid presence that no one can ignore your ability to act when necessary. Power is not noise, power is consequence. There is a stark difference between real authority and the appearance of authority. Many men wear impressive social masks, speak powerful phrases, try to appear dominant, but crumble under the first emotional pressure. True strength emerges in chaos, not in comfort. Virtù and fortuna favor those who can maintain clarity when everyone around them despairs. Just observe professional environments. There's always that man who loses control when something goes wrong, complains about everything, blames colleagues, speaks impulsively. And there's also the silent man who observes, reorganizes the situation, and makes quick decisions without dramatizing. Who do you think naturally commands respect? The world responds to emotional stability much more than people imagine. And this doesn't mean absence of emotion, it means control over it. A practical example of this is developing the habit of never reacting immediately when emotionally upset. Whether in a family argument, a financial negotiation, or a provocative message, the powerful man understands that impulsive reaction is a free surrender of power. That's why he learns to breathe, observe, interpret, and only then act. Calculated use of force. Always. Even in business, this is evident. Strong companies don't grow just because they have good ideas, but because their leaders are able to make tough decisions without becoming slaves to momentary fear. And few men realize that the greatest battlefield in life is not external, it's internal. The most interesting thing is that true power almost always grows in silence, while others are distracted trying to appear important. The awakened man understands that he doesn't need to announce every plan, show every result, or share every move of his life. His own loyal armies are not built with excessive exposure, but with selective trust and emotional strategy. And this requires constant adaptability, because each environment demands a different reading of human nature. There are times to advance, times to retreat, and times when silence is worth more than any brilliant argument. The man who understands this begins to perceive invisible patterns in relationships. He understands who approaches him out of self-interest, who only respects apparent power, and who truly remains loyal when circumstances change. And this perception completely alters the way he chooses friendships, business dealings, and even romantic relationships. Little by little, he stops trying to convince everyone. After all, strong men don't waste energy trying to be understood by people committed to their own superficiality. And then something curious happens. The less he feels the need to prove his worth, the more influence he naturally begins to exert on the environments around him. But there is a weapon even more powerful than presence, influence, or silent authority. A weapon that immediately reveals who is in emotional control of a situation. And almost no one knows how to use it correctly. The emotional man speaks to relieve tension. The strategic man speaks to produce an effect. This is a small difference in appearance, but gigantic in consequences. Most people reveal weaknesses through their words without realizing it. They talk too much when they are nervous, try to justify everything, over-explain their own decisions, and reveal emotions that should remain protected until the right moment. Machiavelli understood something that few can accept. Whoever controls the information controls part of the game, and this begins with mastering one's own language. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. In practice, the world rewards those who know how to observe much more than those who feel a constant need to expose themselves. Controlled silence creates mystery, and mystery naturally produces psychological respect. Just observe corporate environments, meetings, or even family discussions. Generally, the man who speaks less and observes more ends up noticing details that others completely ignore. Facial expressions, changes in tone, subtle contradictions, hidden insecurities. Everything begins to become visible when he stops occupying his mind, only trying to respond. And there is something almost uncomfortable about this. Impulsive people tend to reveal their own weaknesses when they encounter someone who does not react immediately. Silence acts like a mirror. Many men fear it because they've been conditioned to believe they need to fill any void with words. But dangerous men understand that emptiness also communicates power. Controlled silence doesn't mean artificial coldness or theatrical internet alpha behavior. That's a caricature. True emotional mastery is much more subtle. Better to be feared than loved, in many moments, simply means not being emotionally predictable. The predictable man is easy to manipulate. If any criticism shakes him, any praise controls him, or any rejection destroys his focus, he has already surrendered his emotional center to others. The silent man observes first. He listens before revealing his opinion, and this generates an absurd advantage in human relationships. Imagine a salary negotiation, for example. Many people feel uncomfortable with pauses and end up talking too much to fill the silence. The result? They reveal insecurity, reduce their self-worth, or give in too quickly. Those who can withstand emotional silence can maintain their position without despair. This also appears in relationships. Insecure men feel a constant need to explain everything, seek validation, and react impulsively to any emotional distance. The conscious man understands that a strong presence doesn't come from excessive talking, but from inner stability. Virtue and fortune favor those who can maintain calm, while others become anxious. And there is an extremely powerful exercise to develop this. Spend an entire day listening more than speaking, without trying to impress anyone, just observing human patterns. It's almost frightening how much people reveal when they believe they are leading the conversation. The most curious thing is that silence also protects mental energy. The man who discusses every plan, explains every goal, and shares every move often loses strength even before acting. Calculated use of strength includes understanding that certain ideas need to mature away from external noise. How many men have abandoned promising projects because they listened to opinions that were too small too soon? How many have given up on entrepreneurship, studying English, investing, or changing their lives because they sought premature validation? The awakened man learns to build in silence. His own loyal armies do not announce strategies to the enemy before the battle. And this applies to almost everything in life. Silence allows clarity. It allows interpretation. It allows a deep reading of real human nature. Little by little, he begins to realize that people say much more about themselves than they imagine. The arrogant person reveals fear. The excessively funny person reveals insecurity. The manipulator reveals a lack of control, and the man who masters silence begins to see beyond words. But there is a dangerous detail in this skill. The more he learns to control what he reveals to the world, the more he realizes that almost everyone lives wearing different masks depending on the environment they are in. Every man wears masks. The difference is that some consciously choose which masks to wear, while others spend their entire lives being controlled by characters created to please others. This is one of the most dangerous psychological games of adult life. From an early age, many men learn that they need to appear strong all the time, hide weaknesses, avoid vulnerability, and adapt their personality depending on the environment. Little by little, they stop knowing who they really are. Machiavelli deeply understood the importance of the appearance of virtue. He knew that the world rarely rewards raw authenticity. The world responds to perception. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. This means understanding that image matters, presence matters, and the way someone presents themselves directly influences the treatment they receive. The problem begins when a man gets completely lost within his own mask, when he creates such a rigid character that he can no longer access his own essence without feeling guilt or shame. And this happens all the time. Men who feign confidence while living dominated by fear. Men who play the nice guy while accumulating silent resentment. Men who perform success on social media while emotionally sinking away from the cameras. The most dangerous thing is not using a strategic mask. The most dangerous thing is forgetting that it exists. An intelligent man understands that different environments demand different versions of behavior. This isn't deceit, it's social intelligence. Constant adaptability has always been one of the most important weapons of powerful men throughout history. A leader doesn't speak to investors the same way he speaks to close friends. A doctor doesn't communicate like a soldier in action. A serious businessman knows when to be welcoming and when to demonstrate absolute firmness. Calculated use of force also involves strategic emotional communication. But there's a very fine line between adaptation and self-abandonment. And many men cross that line without realizing it. They begin to live for external approval. They mold opinions to be accepted. They hide real desires to avoid judgment. They enter into relationships where they need to perform all the time. And then something strange happens. The more they try to please, the less respect they receive. Better to be feared than loved begins precisely here. The moment a man understands that respect is born from internal coherence, not emotional submission. A practical example of this appears in professional environments. The man who never says no, accepts everything, tries to please all his colleagues, and avoids any confrontation ends up being useful but rarely respected. A man who maintains a firm, polite, and clear demeanor conveys value silently. He doesn't need to humiliate anyone. He simply doesn't compromise his own dignity. There's another, even deeper detail. Masks also protect emotional wounds. Many men develop personas as a psychological survival mechanism. The arrogant man is sometimes just terrified of seeming inadequate. The excessively funny man may be hiding profound loneliness. The hyper-productive man may be running from inner emptiness. Decisions based on real human nature reveal that almost every extreme behavior hides something unresolved emotionally. And when a man begins to realize this in himself, his view of the world changes completely. He stops judging so quickly. He starts observing more. He understands that true power is not about appearing perfect, but about maintaining awareness of one's own persona without being enslaved by it. Virtù and fortuna favor those who can look at themselves without comfortable illusions. And this requires rare courage, because there comes a moment when he needs to silently ask himself, who would I be if I didn't need to impress anyone? Few can bear to face this question honestly. But those who can begin to access a kind of strength far more dangerous than social appearance. A strength built not by persona, but by the ability to transform pain into raw material for growth. Most men try to escape pain as if it were a mistake of existence, but the most dangerous men in history understood something uncomfortable too early. Inevitable suffering can destroy a man, or build a man impossible to manipulate. It all depends on how he interprets his own pain. Machiavelli observed human reality without romanticism. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. And the reality is simple. Almost every strong man has gone through some kind of silent chaos before developing true emotional stability. Betrayal, rejection, financial failure, abandonment, humiliation, loss. These experiences act as psychological furnaces. The problem is that many transform suffering into identity. They make their own pain a permanent home. They repeat the story of what they suffered so many times that they begin to live emotionally trapped in the past. The strategic man does the opposite. He transforms suffering into a laboratory. He observes patterns. He learns about himself. He analyzes where he was naive, impulsive, or emotionally dependent. Better to be feared than loved often means stopping the emotional begging for recognition after reality shows who is truly on your side. And this completely changes how he views loss. Because he understands that some pains didn't come to destroy him, they came to awaken him. There is a stark difference between unproductive suffering and strategic suffering. Unproductive suffering is constantly complaining without changing behavior. It's repeating the same mistakes, expecting different results. It's using the past as a permanent justification for remaining small. Strategic suffering, on the other hand, generates clarity. A person begins to realize that each difficult experience contains important information about true human nature. A simple example. After a betrayal, some men fall into emotional despair, develop paranoia, or begin to hate everyone. Others coldly analyze the signs they ignored. They perceive their own emotional deficiencies, emotional dependence, premature overconfidence, or lack of clear boundaries. Calculated use of strength includes learning from the impact without becoming bitter. And this requires rare maturity. The awakened man understands that intense emotions distort perception. Therefore, he learns not to make major decisions while dominated by anger or despair. Instead, he transforms pain into silent fuel. Many of the most financially disciplined men were born after humiliating financial crises. Many of the most emotionally strong men emerged after devastating rejections. Virtue and fortune favor those who manage to keep moving, even while bleeding internally. And this is not motivational poetry. It's a psychological strategy applied to emotional survival. Perhaps the greatest power of strategic suffering is its ability to shatter illusions. A person begins to see who they truly are when they lose comfort, status, or external approval. Because while everything is easy, everyone seems strong. True nature emerges in chaos. Decisions based on real human nature reveal that many relationships, friendships, and alliances exist only as long as there is emotional convenience involved. And this realization can be painful at first, but it is also liberating. A person learns to stop begging for presence. They learn to better select who enters their life. They learn to build inner silence instead of a constant need for validation. Their own loyal armies are not formed through emotional deprivation, but through observation, time, and consistency. Little by little, they begin to understand that some pain was necessary to prevent them from continuing to live naively. And there's a curious detail in all this. The more a person learns to consciously endure discomfort, the less manipulable they become. Because those who endure solitude don't accept just any company. Those who endure pressure don't bend easily. Those who endure silence don't need to desperately seek approval. But there is an enemy even more dangerous than rejection, failure, or external betrayal. An enemy that knows all the shortcuts of his mind because he lives inside it all the time. A man's greatest enemy is rarely external. It's not the competitor, the traitor, the environment, or the lack of opportunities. Most of the time, the real saboteur is his own disorganized mind, trying to protect him from the discomfort necessary for growth. And the problem is that it does this in an extremely convincing way. It doesn't say, give up. It says, start tomorrow. It doesn't say you're afraid. It says, you just need to think a little more. Machiavelli deeply understood that decisions based on real human nature require first recognizing one's own emotional fragility before trying to control any external scenario. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. And the reality is that many men live trapped in an invisible cycle of elegant procrastination. They consume productivity content without producing. They plan without executing. They study without applying. They dream without building. And all this while believing they are still moving forward. The inner enemy loves comfort, disguised as preparation. It convinces a man that he needs to wait for the perfect moment, the ideal course, the right motivation or absolute confidence before acting. But the perfect moment almost never arrives, and while he waits, other men, less talented but more disciplined, continue to quietly accumulate real experience. Self-sabotage also appears in much more subtle ways. Sometimes it manifests as over-analysis. The man thinks so much about the possibilities of failure that he completely paralyzes his own actions. Other times it appears as constant distraction, hours wasted on short videos, social media, pointless discussions, or empty entertainment, while his own life remains stagnant. Calculated use of force includes protecting attention as if it were a limited military resource, because it is. The awakened man understands that everything that captures his mind daily slowly begins to shape his destiny. A practical example of this is observing men who complain about their financial situation while spending more time following gossip, games, or online controversies than learning high-value skills. Copywriting, sales, English, investments, video editing, communication, negotiation. Skills like these change entire trajectories when developed consistently. But the inner enemy hates silent consistency because it demands repeated discomfort. Better to be feared than loved also means stopping the constant search for immediate relief. It means enduring the process without needing constant applause. And this becomes evident in simple habits. A disciplined man trains even when he doesn't feel like it. He studies even when he's tired. He saves money even when he wants instant gratification. Not because he's emotionally invincible, but because he understands that fleeting emotions cannot dictate permanent decisions. There is an even more dangerous trap. Man begins to create sophisticated narratives to justify his own stagnation. I'm not ready yet. The market is bad. People aren't helping. My case is different. And little by little, he builds a psychological prison decorated with clever excuses. Virtù and fortuna favor those who can confront themselves without emotional makeup, because brutal self-awareness is one of the rarest weapons in adult life. The strong man can look at himself and silently admit, I am delaying my own life. And although this hurts at first, it also creates freedom, because when he takes full responsibility, he regains the power to act. His own loyal armies begin within his own mind. Disciplined thoughts generate disciplined behavior. Disciplined behavior generates a strong identity, and a strong identity changes destiny. Little by little, he realizes that he doesn't need to win everything at once. He just needs to stop abandoning himself daily. But as he strengthens his own mind, another question inevitably arises: who truly deserves to walk alongside him in this new construction? Because not all closeness is loyalty, and not all loyalty survives when a man truly begins to evolve. Few things reveal as much about human nature as the way people behave when you start to grow up. While a man remains weak, lost, or emotionally dependent, almost everyone seems comfortable in his presence. But the moment he develops clarity, discipline, and direction, relationships silently begin to change. Machiavelli understood that true loyalty should never be confused with temporary emotional closeness. Politics should be guided by reality, not ideals. Many people stay by someone's side only as long as convenience, utility, or emotional control is involved, and this shouldn't make a man paranoid, but aware. Better to be feared than loved at certain times means stopping begging for permanence from someone who has clearly demonstrated instability of character. The awakened man learns that trust shouldn't be given quickly just because someone speaks beautifully, shows intense emotion, or seems superficially similar. He begins to observe patterns. Who disappears when you need them? Who only shows up when they need something? Who genuinely celebrates your achievements and who changes their behavior when they perceive your progress? These small observations say more about a person than entire speeches about friendship or loyalty. And there's something curious about all this. Emotionally needy men often ignore obvious signs of infidelity just to avoid loneliness. True loyalty is almost always revealed in the silent details. It's not just in words, but in consistency. The strategic man learns to value people who maintain a stable posture even when there is no immediate benefit involved. Loyal armies of one's own have never been built solely on sympathy. They have been built on trust, tested by time. Calculated use of force also involves knowing how to limit access to one's own life. Not everyone needs to know your plans, weaknesses, or future strategies. Many men give away intimacy too quickly and are then surprised when their vulnerabilities are used against them emotionally. A simple example of this happens in the professional environment. There are colleagues who ask excessive questions not out of genuine interest, but to gauge weaknesses, insecurities, and opportunities for social advantage. The conscious man notices this early on. He learns to be polite without being completely accessible. He learns to listen without revealing too much. He learns that strategic silence protects emotional energy. Virtù and fortuna favor those who can balance human openness with psychological perception. And this also applies to romantic relationships. Naive men confuse initial emotional intensity with real depth. A mature man, on the other hand, observes behavior under pressure, consistency in attitudes, and stability over time. Because words impress, but patterns reveal character. Perhaps the hardest lesson about betrayal is accepting that it almost never comes from declared enemies. It usually comes from people close, admired, or emotionally important. And that's precisely why it hurts so much. But the strong man transforms this pain into recalibration, not emotional destruction. Decisions based on real human nature teach that prolonged resentment only keeps the betrayer occupying space within one's own mind. The dangerous man doesn't waste years nurturing silent hatred. He learns, adjusts boundaries, and continues building constant adaptability. This doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It means not allowing bad experiences to transform his entire identity. Many men, after being betrayed, enter cycles of extreme isolation, absolute distrust, or emotional cynicism. And without realizing it, they end up allowing a single negative experience to destroy their ability to build valuable future connections. The awakened man avoids this extreme. He understands that true loyalty exists, but it is rare. And precisely because it is rare, it must be carefully protected. Little by little, he realizes that his circle begins to shrink, but his peace of mind increases. And then, an even more uncomfortable realization emerges. The more he evolves, the more he understands that no one will come to save him from his own mediocrity. There is a silent discipline necessary to go through this transformation without going back. Most men talk about discipline as if it were a pretty aesthetic of perfect routine, organized coffee, and motivational morning quotes. But real discipline almost never seems inspiring while it's happening. It's silent, repetitive, uncomfortable, and often invisible to others. Machiavelli understood that great transformations never arose solely from emotional motivation. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, and the reality is simple. Dangerous men do what needs to be done even when they don't feel like it. This completely separates those who only dream from those who build. The average man acts based on momentary emotion. The disciplined man acts based on direction. Better to be feared than loved, in a sense, means developing such a solid presence that not even his own emotions can easily divert him from his chosen path. And this requires brutal honesty with himself. Because nobody sees the silent training, the tiring nights of studying, the weekends refusing distractions, or the moments when he needs to fight against his own mind to keep moving forward. The world tends to admire ready-made results, but completely ignores the amount of psychological discomfort necessary to build them. And there's something almost cruel about it. The more disciplined a man becomes, the less he depends on external motivation to keep going. True discipline is born when a man understands that freedom without internal control becomes slow self-destruction. Calculated use of force also means directing energy towards what truly produces long-term transformation. A practical example of this is observing men who desire financial independence but spend impulsively trying to maintain a social appearance. Or men who want respect but cannot control basic impulses such as procrastination, addiction to quick dopamine, or a constant need for validation. Virtù and fortuna favor those who can remain consistent when no one is watching, and consistency changes everything. Reading 10 pages a day for years changes perception. Regular training changes identity. Saving and investing small amounts consistently changes financial reality. Learning English daily opens doors that many don't even imagine. The problem is that silent results take time to appear, and the weak man abandons processes that haven't yet delivered immediate emotional reward. The strong man understands that true growth almost always happens first in the invisible. His own loyal armies are built before the battle, not during the chaos. Similarly, strong character is developed before the crisis arrives, and this creates a type of stability that is extremely rare in the modern world, the ability to keep moving forward without needing to be constantly pushed by fleeting emotions. There is also a profound psychological transformation that occurs when discipline ceases to be an obligation and becomes identity. The man no longer tries to be strong. He begins to see himself as someone who silently honors his word. And this completely alters his relationship with pain, fatigue, and difficulty. Decisions based on real human nature show that almost everyone wants immediate comfort, but few can endure the discomfort necessary to access an above-average life. The disciplined man learns to tolerate this discomfort without dramatizing everything. He understands that not every day will be inspiring. Some days will be just silent repetition, and that is precisely where the power lies. Because while many give up when the enthusiasm ends, he continues building. Constant adaptability allows him to adjust strategy without abandoning direction. Little by little, the man realizes that discipline is not only for making money, building a strong physique, or achieving status. It serves to prevent his mind from becoming enslaved to its own impulses again. And the more he strengthens this internal structure, the more difficult it becomes to manipulate him emotionally. But there is an inevitable consequence of this process. A moment arrives when he no longer recognizes the weak, anxious, and lost man he once was. Then something even rarer emerges. A man who may not be invincible, but who has become virtually impossible to stop permanently. The unstoppable man isn't born ready-made. He's built slowly through silent decisions that almost no one sees. And perhaps that's the most uncomfortable part for most people. There's no magical transformation, cinematic moment, or instant awakening that can solve a lifetime of internal disorganization. Machiavelli understood that true power has always been a consequence of strategic clarity combined with adaptability. Politics guided by reality, not ideals. The unstoppable man understands this deeply. He doesn't live trapped in the fantasy of a perfect life. He knows that losses, failures, rejections, and moments of doubt will continue to exist. The difference is that now these things can no longer destroy him emotionally as before. Better to be feared than loved comes to mean something even deeper, becoming emotionally solid enough so that external chaos doesn't completely control his internal direction. The average man collapses when he loses approval, money, or comfort. The unstoppable man recalibrates. He suffers, feels the impact, but keeps walking, and that generates an extremely rare presence. Because most people are only strong while everything is working, few people can maintain clarity amidst the pressure, and it is precisely this quiet stability that transforms an ordinary man into someone impossible to manipulate easily. The most interesting thing is that the unstoppable man rarely feels the need to prove his superiority all the time. The stronger he becomes internally, the less emotional neediness he carries in his relationships. Calculated use of force includes knowing when to act, when to retreat, and when to simply ignore useless provocations. This requires absurd emotional maturity. Many men waste energy trying to win small arguments, impress irrelevant people, or compete in environments that don't even deserve attention. The awakened man selects battles. He understands that focus is a limited resource. Virtù and fortuna favor those who conserve energy for truly important goals, and this appears in small, everyday attitudes. He doesn't immediately respond to every provocation. He doesn't feel a constant need to justify personal decisions. He doesn't abandon goals because someone doubted him. A practical example of this is observing men who start important projects, entrepreneurship, studying medicine, learning high-value skills, building wealth, and give up at the first external judgment. The unstoppable man, however, understands that almost every great transformation initially seems strange to complacent people. His own loyal armies don't ask permission to exist. They grow stronger silently until reality speaks for them. And gradually he realizes something powerful. When a man controls his own mind, the world loses much of its power to control him emotionally. Perhaps the most dangerous characteristic of the unstoppable man is that he ceases to live driven solely by ego. Decisions based on true human nature show that men guided exclusively by pride end up destroying themselves, trying to prove their worth all the time. The mature man, however, learns to build purpose above the need for applause. He doesn't need to be the loudest in the room, nor the most showy, nor the most validated. There is a strange tranquility in men who have finally understood who they are. And this completely changes the way they walk through the world. Constant adaptability allows them to survive changes without losing their essence. If necessary, they start over. If they fall, they get up. If they lose something, they build it again. Because now they know that true power was never just in money, status, or external circumstances. It was in the ability to keep moving even after the impact. And few men reach this level because few endure the process necessary to build it. In the end, the unstoppable man is not the one who never feels fear, pain, or doubt. It is the one who has learned to go through all of that without abandoning his own direction. While many spend their lives trying to appear strong, he became truly strong. Ultimately, almost no man realizes how far he is from his strongest self until he begins to confront himself without excuses. And perhaps that is the most uncomfortable truth of all. The world never demanded that you be perfect, but it will always test your weaknesses. Machiavelli understood this deeply. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. Life doesn't reward silent intentions, hidden dreams, or wasted potential. It responds to what you build repeatedly, especially when no one is watching, and now the question ceases to be theoretical. It becomes personal. How many decisions in your life were truly yours? And how many were made merely to please, avoid conflict, or seek approval? How many times have you abandoned your own direction because you were afraid of judgment? How many versions of yourself died before they even existed because comfort seemed safer than transformation? Because there comes a moment in every man's life when he needs to choose between remaining numb or waking up for good. And waking up hurts. It hurts to perceive manipulation. It hurts to see superficial relationships. It hurts to understand how much fear has controlled his steps for years. But there's also something powerful in all of this. When a man finally takes responsibility for his own mind, he regains a kind of freedom that almost no one experiences. Better to be feared than loved begins the moment you stop emotionally begging for validation and start building real presence. Calculated use of force, constant adaptability, decisions based on real human nature. Little by little, you stop reacting to the world impulsively and begin to move with clarity. And men with clarity become extremely difficult to manipulate. Now I want to know from you, which part of this video resonated with you the most? At what point did you realize that perhaps you're still living on autopilot? And more importantly, what will be the first concrete decision you make after watching this? Write in the comments. I want to see who truly understood the message behind these words. And if you want to continue learning about power, strategy, human behavior, discipline, and the mindset of the most dangerous men in history, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because while most continue to sleep, some men are silently learning how to master their own minds and completely change their own destiny.